How are y'all? Awesome. I'm sure it's a little bit maybe weird's not the word. I don't know what the word is, which maybe doesn't speak to my ability as a poet. But to have to come back from spring break to sit for poetry on your first day back. Oh, shucks. What's that? Not sad, yes! All these poems are for you, good sir. May all of you follow, what is your name? May all of you follow Thomas's lead through life. Well, my work here is done. Later, guys. Come closer. Come into this. Come closer. You are quite the beauty. If no one has ever told you that before, know that right now. You are quite the beauty. There is joy in how your mouth dances with your teeth. Your smiles are simply signs of how sacred your life actually is, so step into it. Come closer. Know that whatever God might be, he asked the world around him to help him make something of worth. He woke from dreaming, scraped the soil from spaces stuck somewhere inside himself. He made you and he was happy. You make that Lord happy. Come into this. Come closer. Know that something softer than us, but just as holy, planted pieces of itself into our feet that we might one day dance our way back. Know that you are almost home. Come just a little bit closer. There are birds that beat their wings beneath your breastplates. Gentle sparrows that ache to sing. Come aching hearts, come soldiers of joy, doormen of truth. Know that my heart was too big for my body, so I let it go. And most days this world has thinned me to where I'm just another cloud, forgetting another flock of swans, having shaved off so many of my corners that I have felt at home only in the shape of a ball, bending myself so far backwards that the song of my mother believed I was returning home. But believe me when I tell you that somehow my soul manages to squeeze itself into very narrow spaces. Place your hand beneath your head when you sleep tonight. Perhaps you will find it there, making beauty as we sleep, making beauty as we dream, making beauty as we turn over. When we turn over in the ground, may the ghosts that we have asked our answers of do that turning, kneading us into crumbs of light and into this thing-loved thing called life. Come into it. Come, you wooden museums. Gentle tigers, little giants. I see teacups upside down, glowing across your grins. Your hearts are like my hands. Some days all they do is tremble. I am like you. I am just like you. I too at times am filled with so much fear, but like a hallway must find the strength to walk through it. Walk through this with me. Through this church of blood, bone, and muscle that is ours, there is a doorknob that glows like chance before you. Grab it, turn, and pull. Step through, back straight, chin up, eyes open, hearts loud. Walk through this with me. Walk through this with me. For you and I, we're not so very different. We're more alike than we may appear to be at times. We all wanted a high school sweetheart. We wanted to be young in the 50s with meatloafs and sock hops and lawns so perfect they looked like Clark Gable was kissing them. We wanted to be 13 and alive and meet a girl that was 13 and alive and walk with her past the grandstands, to sit and hold hands with, to sit and kiss with like it was something that you had missed, but that never was. We once wanted to be poor, but not too poor. Connecting this country like Kerouac and thumbs, waking up to find you out on the road with your pockets empty except for your hands. But your hands, they'd be overflowing with your soul, but that's not what happened. We once went to bed like between the bed sheets was a valley where dinosaurs still breathed, and how we would capture these triceratops and brontosauruses, but even he was opened up with the smoke that rose out of the homes and the corners we once climbed through, the streets and the footballs with which we once threw, the school desks upon which we once drew, the windows that sat open through which we once flew, before the outside world of parking spaces and dead friends came flooding on in. And we forgot what we wanted, and we became what we become. Waitresses and bartenders, city employees and temp positions. We are junkies and one-kiss poems, and we cry the stars. As we write our scars onto dumpsters and electric boxes, because the only thing that we can hear is our hearts. And the only ones listening are the streets, to the blood that breathes, to the letters we leave when we dream to rise ourselves up out of these burning buildings. But instead we get buried somewhere beneath, because I know my life is like some high school kid's notebook. That kid that shuffles back and forth between school and home, stacking the letters and the pictures too close for anyone outside of his own imagination to read, because it's through the ink that his heart beats, that his heart breathes, and we all just wanted to write these notes. Check if you like me. Check if you don't. Check if you'll date me. Check if you won't, because we all wanted love songs to be true, and we did love dinosaurs once. We wanted the stars to hold our hands, to lick the teeth, to love us. So let your smiles twist. Like my heart dancing precariously on the edge of my fingertips, staining them. Like that same high school kid licking his thoughts using his Sharpie tip, writing, I was here. I was here. And ain't none of y'all can write that in the spot that I just wrote it in. I am here breathing in, and you are here breathing out. And every breath I breathe brings me a second closer to the day that my mother may die. And every breath I take takes me a second further from the moment she caught my father's eye. And every word I carry is in the stone to put into place in the foundation that I'm building these days and erase something that I never saw, what all of us wanted, what none of us got, what we all had and have, what we all forgot, that we all wanted to be something, that we all became something. And it might not be the message on to be when we were kids, but something is still something. And like some cats say, something's better than nothing. Feet are smarter than an engine, and dreams are stronger than thighs, and questions, the only answers we need to have to know that we are as alive as the time when I held the mind of a child, asking, why is 2 + 3 always equal to 5? Where do people go to when they die? What made the beauty of the moon and the beauty of the sea? Did that beauty make you? Did that beauty make me? Will it make me something? Will I be something? Am I something? And the answer comes, you already are. You always were. And you still have time to be. Thank you. So, as Mr. Schmidt said, my name is Anis Mojgani. And I write poems. And then I travel around and I perform them. And I did not grow up thinking that this was what I was going to do. I grew up thinking a number of different things that I was interested in. And then when came time for me to go off to college, I went off to do what most young 18-year-olds do, which is to go off and study how to draw comic books for a living. And I did that for 4 years, and while I was there, I got really interested in writing and performing poems, and found myself just curious about that when I finished at college, and faced that direction and decided to see what might happen, and that led me here. And so what that means is that I spend about, over the course of a year, I usually spend about 3 to 5 months of that year traveling, doing full shows, usually at colleges and universities, sometimes at high schools like this, sometimes at festivals, sometimes at retreats, or for corporations or whatever, just a bunch of different things. And so I do that, and then the rest of the time I'm at home writing and managing all this crazy stuff that involves writing and performing poetry. So I'm gonna share some more work with you guys, but before we jump into that, I just wanted to see if there was any questions lurking out in the darkness. Yes, Thomas.
What is your favorite reading voice?
My favorite reading voice? Just mine. I don't read in anybody else's but my own. So mine. Not so much. I tried to, like, if I'm sharing poems, I tend to sort of follow the poem and see what's happening during that moment, and allow whatever to come out, as opposed to sort of like, oh, well, let me read it like this or read it like this. I tend to just sort of share it and see what happens. What is that? The weirdest place I ever went to recite poetry. I can't think of what's the, I have two answers. One was good and one was not so good. One, I was visiting New York, and a friend that I had met online, we only had talked via Twitter. He owns a big pants corporation. Not as in like big pants, but as in like a big corporation that makes pants. And he invited me to come do poems sort of last minute at the office. They were having like this town meeting amongst all the workers. And so in exchange for doing poems, he got me Broadway tickets and free pants. And so that was a little bit strange and awesome, because they're really nice pants, and it was a really awesome show. On the other side, like, was doing this show for this outdoor festival in Las Vegas that was this arts festival, and it was just horrible in its strangeness, in that it was like about like 6 o'clock in the evening, and I was supposed to do a 30-minute set at that time, and then a 30-minute set down at the end of the night, like around 9:30, and it was just like this part of Las Vegas where people were kind of walking around, checking out art booths, and there was different bands playing, and then there was like this stage where I was doing poems, and people would sort of like walk past and stop and listen for a couple seconds, and then continue on walking, and it was just one of those very surreal things where you just feel kind of like you're just saying poems into nothing, and then got onto a plane the next morning and went back home, and it was just one of those things where it was just incredibly bizarre, the overall just feeling of it. Any other questions at the moment? Yes, over here, in the white shirt.
Do you have any influences, like, classically and, like, modern influences? Like, what would you say are your biggest, like, classical influence and biggest minds?
I haven't read a whole lot of, like, classical stuff, probably in a very, very long time. I never got too much into, like, very classical stuff, as in, like, you know, I never sat down and was like, I'm going to read a bunch of, like, ancient Greek poetry, you know, like, but, I mean, like, folks that are not from now that that have withstood sort of, like, the years of my relationship with them, like, very much like Rilke, Walt Whitman. I'm not like a huge Emily Dickinson fan, but nor am I a non-fan. And I'd recently come across some poems of hers that I hadn't read in a while, or that I hadn't read ever, and really, really felt them, really connected with them. With regards to today, there's so many, you know, and a number of them are also just sort of like people that I have the good fortune to just like call as friends, just because of the community that I come from. I mean, some of those people have come here. Derek Brown, Buddy Wakefield. Derek Brown is a poet that is, you know, he's one of my closest friends, but he also happens to be just one of my poetry and performing heroes. But I also really love a poet named Lucille Clifton, Kevin Young, Jack Gilbert, Frank Stanford, Ann Sexton, Nikki Finney. All these are poets that I'm always just blown away every time I read their work. I saw another hand over here. I don't tend to rap any of my poems. The rhythmic aspect of the poems that I tend to share to folks, as I was saying earlier with regards to, like, you know, the reading voice, I tend to not, it's the same way with the rhythms and the patterns of the performance, that I tend to sort of allow to happen what might happen. So as opposed to kind of like building a constricted sort of like rhythmic pattern for the poems, just sort of like see what happens by existing with them. And definitely, like, a number of the poems I've been doing for a number of years now. So they start to kind of like fit into a certain mold and find like where their shape is a bit more naturally. And definitely when I was younger, I would tend to sort of kind of like shape them a bit more. But eventually stopped doing that and just let them kind of like find their way to the rhythm that felt most natural for them. So yeah, it's not so much kind of like putting something on top of, but seeing like having it reveal to me what's the best shape for it to take. Yes? What led me to study comics, and is it still part of my life? So I spent most of my youth really fascinated by architecture, and was just obsessed with it. Thought it was a really amazing thing, and always imagined that that's what I wanted to do. And then when I was about, I think maybe 14 or so, I didn't feel it in me to be a person to kind of like go to an office building and sit in a room and with a task at hand and be there until 5 and go home and repeat the next day. And while I had immense respect for anyone that does do that, it just didn't speak to me and didn't sing to me. And I couldn't imagine doing that. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I read a lot of comic books at that time, and I drew comics and cartoons. And a school, an art college in Savannah, Georgia, came to my high school, and my mom had told me about them. And so I went and asked if they had anything for comics, and they said they had a degree for it. And I was like, all right. And so I went there. And it was something that I just really enjoyed doing and learning about. And essentially it was basically about like learning how to tell stories. And so a lot of the work that, when I started kind of like writing more poetry and having the performance of it be part of my life, a lot of the things that I learned about telling stories through comics I found pretty applicable to writing and performing poems. So in that way, it's still very direct with regards to like what I got from studying comics. But for a number of years, I haven't been, I've maintained a sketchbook over the years, but comics have not been really part of my life. And over the past couple years, I've been kind of finding my way back to seeing how my process of making art can work with making comics, because that was a challenge for me. And so finding my way back to that, like my most recent book is, like I have 3 books that are all just poems. And then this recent book, though, is sort of a weird picture book / graphic novel. Like it's not straight comic books, but the whole thing is fully illustrated. So I'm trying to find my way back to kind of like having that be part of my life. Any other question at the moment? Oh, way in the back. Not in front of people. I'm the greatest freestyle in my car and in the shower. In public, not so much. But like, there's definitely always an element to, at least with the work that I do on stages, and a number of other poets are kind of like this. I think a lot of performance poets tend to fall into largely 2 camps. One that is very highly choreographed and very intentional, and poets that are a little bit looser with what they're doing on stage. And I fall more into that camp, in that while all the poems that I perform for folks are written out before, and are poems that I've performed, some of them for years, like for a really very long time. But how their energy and sometimes the lines get changed based on, just sort of like what's happening in the room and where I am that day and where the audience is that day. Particularly also how they fall into just sort of like the set. It's like I didn't come on stage and have this prepared answer for this question that I knew was going to come from you. So it's like all that gets funneled and feeded into the poems themselves as well. So there's still a little bit of improvisation and spontaneity, even though the poems like are not freestyled by any means. Yes.
So since you started out as like a visual art person, do you find yourself tied to writing about visual concepts? Is that something that
Yes, maybe not always like super specifically. Like I don't tend to sit down to write poems that are really trying to capture extremely visual things. Like, oh well, let me like heavily describe this thing. Let me describe what this stage looks like to somebody. But I do have an affinity for there being a lot of imagery within my poems, and playing with the color and the scents and the smell and the sights of all those things. So there's still a pretty large visual quotient to the work that I seek to write and enjoy writing, if that makes sense. Any other questions at the moment? All right, we'll take one more question, and I'll do some more poems. So I'm going to take this question, but then all these hands over here, hold on to that question. I'll come back to you shortly. What is my Twitter? My Twitter is, I think it's just Mojgani. Everybody knows how to spell Mojgani, right? Mojgani. I think that's what it is. I always forget if I have an A in front of it or not. What is it? No. All right. It's just Mojgani. So that's written around somewhere. So you can write that down and follow my asinine observations in life. High-five me with your heart. High-thousand me with your hearts. I know you have many of them. We all love many things. I love biscuits. I love cheeseburgers. I love little pancakes. I've loved more than just things that I chew with my mouth. I did love my wife. Sometimes I would chew my wife's shoulder in my mouth. Sometimes my wife, she was annoyed by this. But still, sometimes my wife did love me back. Some things that I have loved have never loved me back. Random racist man upon the street. While your rhetoric may anger me, I still have love for you, though you probably will not love me back. Walrus, I love you. Though were I to be around you, you would probably gore me with your tusks. Perhaps this is not a good example, as the wild unknowing of wild creatures is not necessarily the same as not loving something back. Perhaps also because I actually do not love the walrus, but simply mention him here because there's a small figurine of a walrus on the coffee table as I write this poem. However, I do love the elephant. However, he too would probably gore me with his tusks. Again, not out of unlove, but perhaps fear. I do not love fear, but I respect him, in that he loves me, testing how well I carry the sword of my intent through the land of the midnight farm. The land of the midnight farm, it is a strange and scary place. There are perhaps serial killers and or possums lurking in its darkness. The serial killer may love me, but in no way I wish to be loved. Their love may involve the removal of my skin and the wearing of it out to the club. The possum may love me, but I do not love the possum. In fact, I hate the possum, solely because of how ugly I find the possum to be. Yes, I realize this is a shallow reason to dislike something. So I'm trying, possum. I'm trying to not love you so much. Instead, possibly just be ambivalent to your existence. But oh, I want to hate you like I hate the thought of bee stings, black people, and beans. I put black people in there just to see if y'all were paying attention. I freaking love black people. I freaking love white people. Though sometimes I find both of them to be trifling. Don't get me wrong. The only mother that I've ever had is black. The only wife that I've ever had is white. But damn if we humans aren't a trifling animal at times. But still, I love you, you mountains of trifle and futility, of perseverance and lightness, of incessant rowing towards the sun, even while facing it, wondering why there is no forward momentum. Turn around. Look at my many hands, holding up my many hearts and a mini high-five salutation to you, Nina Simone, Paul Newman. So many things in this world I have loved. Rising with the sun, sleeping in late. Little pancakes. And even though she left, my wife's shoulders. There was like 3 questions hungering to be voiced over in the back. We'll take this closest one right here. Yes, you, sir. Did you ask, do I find more inspiration when I'm on tour than when I'm at home? It's a mix. You know, I wouldn't say that it's more, it's just a little bit different. You know, there's definitely a different energy that happens when you're on the road than when at home. You know, like one of the pros about the energy that you find when you're on tour is that there's just like a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot of new experiences, a lot of things that don't happen in your life on a day-to-day basis. Seeing new places, meeting new people, it's just a lot of excitement and a lot of energy. And that definitely fuels an inspiration, and particularly like, you're performing. So for me, the more work that I'm doing, the more inspired I get. So like having that fire and excitement of like performing the work definitely sort of sometimes like makes the fire get bigger and makes me want to create more work. But I also find that spending time basically more or less talking with myself, removed from all those things, I find a lot of inspiration in that. And being able to take the time to kind of like sort of sit with myself and try to figure out what it is that's happening inside of me that needs to be voiced and brought outside of my body. And I can't do that as readily on the road as I would like to at times. So it's a bit more kind of like collecting all this stuff while I'm on the road. And then when I get back home, sort of sifting through and seeing what it is that I've collected. And what is it that I want to speak to, and what is it that I want to write about. There were a couple hands in the back. Yes? As a young child, like I said before, I was really into architecture, and so for like my hero when I was a kid was this architect named Frank Lloyd Wright. Like I was just obsessed with him, like at a very, very young age, just sort of obsessed with that. But there's a lot of inspiration from like with regards to writing poems. Not so much as a young child, because I didn't write poems at a very young age. I started writing when I was about 17. And a big source of inspiration and influence when I first started writing was a poet named E.E. Cummings. And then when I got to college and started finding poems from other places that weren't just in these like books that I'd been given in school and class, it opened me up to a lot of different people. And a lot of people that were part of the world of spoken word that I ended up joining and participating in. Like the poet Jeffrey McDaniel was a poet that came through Savannah, Georgia, where I was in school. And he was the first poet that I saw perform their work live in front of me. And it blew the top off of my brain. So he was one. Saul Williams, the poet and musician, came through Savannah eons ago, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There's a poet named Patricia Smith who's from Chicago originally, and she's just a beast. She's amazing. Like there's no one quite like her. So all those people were pretty heavy influences with regards to poetry when I was in the younger days of writing that. Other questions? Right in front of me. It depends on the poem, but I will say someone else in the earlier session asked about memorizing, and I tend to find that for most of us, our relationship with memorizing is being assigned to memorize something. Usually there's some sort of like class assignment sometime in elementary school or middle school or high school where we have to memorize something, and it's something that we're forced to memorize. And so I think that we have this association that memorization is hard, that it's like ugly, that it's like not fun. I'm not saying that memorizing something is like, a barrel of laughs, but it's a lot easier to go about doing it when it's something that you want to memorize. And even more so when it's something that you've written. It's something that already came from you. And so it just needs to kind of like return back to that. So even though it's not like this like super, super easy thing, that's just like, read it once and I just got it memorized. It's a lot easier than I think all of us sometimes think that it is. And it's just a matter of kind of like being familiar with this poem and associating yourself with it and spending time with it. I mean, like all the poems that I memorize are poems that I have read, like when they were being written, are poems that I would read out loud as part of that process of creating the poem. So I would read them aloud hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And so then when I felt comfortable enough to sort of like start trying to memorize them, 75% of the work was already done. Like it was already very, very familiar with the poem. And so that made it a lot easier. Other questions? over here. The, professionally or just out of love? I love dancing so much, particularly more so these days. I think that there was like a couple years where like I just didn't go out dancing as readily, and so like over the last 6 months, all I want to do is dance, like more so than poetry. Like I'm gonna like maybe I should just start taking some classes and just start doing dancing on the road instead of poems, like. And anytime like some new song will come on, like I'll be like, oh, I should choreograph some of this. Like when Formation came out, I was like doing this residency outside of Atlanta. So I was like just like in this cabin in the woods for like a month, and like Formation came out, and like that day I was just listening to it nonstop all night long, and I was like, man, I want to choreograph something to this. It was like the first time I'd ever like wanted to choreograph a specific dance for a specific song. So yes, I do dance, and I do love dancing, very much so. That's the first time I've ever gotten asked that question. So kudos to you. Yes, in the red. How long does it take to create a poem? It depends. Usually how my process works is that I just sort of like start writing and just not care about what it is that I'm trying to write. Like I don't want to sit down and think about like, oh, well, let me write a poem about this, or what could I write a poem about? Instead, just sort of dump whatever thoughts are running through my head. And then look at this sort of like mushy stew and see if there's something in there that's interesting to me, and start picking out these parts and pieces and start putting them together. And that process is, I tend to go sit down to write for anywhere from 2 to 5 hours. And so like that process of sort of kind of like building a poem out of nothing is usually sort of like a few days of kind of like returning to those sessions to interact with that poem. And then the editing process can be anywhere from like maybe a week to a month to a year. Like sometimes it's something that I think is done and I just set it aside in my computer, and then it becomes a poem that maybe I want to perform, or a poem that I want to put in a book or submit to a literary journal. And so I pull it back out and engage with asking it questions again to see if this still works. And so the act of writing it is a pretty short process, but then sort of fine-tuning it can be a very, very long time. And then, as I told someone earlier, sometimes I think a poem is finished, and it might be a poem that I'm sharing with audiences and shows. And it might even be a poem that I've shared in audiences with shows for years. And then, for whatever reason, during a performance, like something clicks and something changes, and I'm able to see the poem from a different place. And so then it changes, even if it's a poem that I thought was finished, for years. And then, so that'll come into effect and start shaping it. So each poem is a little bit different. Yes? Pretty much everything for the most part. I always feel like such a cop-out answer, but I feel like, I think more often than not, most folks, particularly these days, listen to a lot of different things. I listen to, I don't listen to a lot of stuff on the radio. That's like, I just don't listen to the radio. But I mean, as I mentioned, Formation, I listen to Beyonce. I listen to The Roots. I listen to Sylvan Esso. I listen to, I don't know. I mean, a lot of different things. I listen to a lot of hip hop. I listen to a lot of rock. I listen to a lot of old crap. I was about to not say crap. I was about to say something else. But it just sort of depends. Like I mentioned Nina Simone earlier. I love Nina Simone. Nina Simone, I think, is just amazing. I bought 4 records the other day. What did I buy? That's a better question to ask. Just gives me something tangible instead of rambling forever. I bought this record that's a mashup between Mos Def and Marvin Gaye. I bought a record by this New Orleans old school jazz musician named Professor Longhair. Bought this record of this indie band called the Besnard Lakes. And the 4th record, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like a band of It's like this Northern Africa, Middle Eastern band that it's like Middle Eastern flair, blues, and funk. And it's awesome. So it just runs the gamut. Yes? I like to read. I don't do it as much as I should and as I want to. There'll be years where it's like I feel like I'm trying to finish the same 3 books all year long and like never finish any of them. And I'm trying to be a bit more proactive on that. So I have a list of books that I'm like intending to read this year, or at least seeking to it. Like, you know, my sister, she doesn't fill me with a rage, but I'm just so marveled and confused by her. Like when we were kids, we like all of our family read a lot, and like now, like I said, like I just don't have the time to kind of like invest in it. Whereas my sister's reading like 50 to 70 books a year, and I'm like, oh man. So it just sort of depends. Yes? I don't know if I have a genre. Like, what am I reading right now? Right now, I brought with me this book called The Tiger's Wife, which is just a novel. There's a little bit of like magical qualities in it. And it's about this war in Europe and this relationship between a woman and her dead grandfather. And then I have this other book called I Hope I Do Not Raise a Timid Son, I think is the name of it, and it's a collection of humorous essays. So it just sort of depends. I don't regulate to like one genre. I do find myself reading a lot of kids' books. Like I really love picture books. I really love YA novels. I really love middle reader books. So I read a lot of that, genre-wise.
Earlier on, you mentioned E.E. Cummings, but do you feel like the style of literature and like writing and poetry that E.E. Cummings had to be replicated? And if so, like, do you think it should be replicated?
When I was 17, I thought it should be replicated, in that I wrote a lot of really bad knockoff E.E. Cummings poems. It's like, I definitely don't find myself wanting to write nor read poetry that, like, I'll still read the heck out of some E.E. Cummings poems. I think he's fantastic. But like, if I pick up, say, like a book of poetry from the shelf, and it looks like an E.E. Cummings poem, I'm less likely to spend time with that book. And I don't think it has anything to do with the poem or whether it is acceptable or needed or warranted in this day and age, but just sort of my relationship is attracted to a different type of poem at this stage of my life. So I have no problem with folks or an individual like writing poems that kind of like fall into that style of E. Cummings poetry. But it's more likely than not going to be something that I gravitate towards. So 5 minutes. All right. I'm going to do one more poem. If there's time after that, then questions. If you don't get your question asked or answered, shoot it to me online or come up to me to the stage afterwards and feel free to ask it. This is for the fat girls. This is for the little brothers. This is for the schoolyard wimps and for the childhood bullies that tormented them. For the former prom queens and for the milk crate ball players. For the nighttime cereal eaters and for the retired elderly Walmart store front door greeters. Shake the dust. This is for the benches and the people sitting upon them, for the bus drivers driving a million broken hymns, for the men who have to hold down 3 jobs simply to hold up their children, for the nighttime schoolers, and for the midnight bike riders trying to fly. Shake the dust. This is for the 2-year-olds who cannot be understood because they speak half English and half God. Shake the dust. For the boys with the beautiful sisters. Shake the dust. For the girls with the brothers who are going crazy. For the ones who are going out of their minds. For the gym class wallflowers and the 12-year-olds afraid of taking public showers. For the kid who's always late to class because he forgets the combination to his lockers. For the girl who loves somebody else. Shake the dust. This is for the hard men who want love but know that it won't come. For the ones who are forgotten, the ones the amendments do not stand up for the ones who are told, speak only when you are spoken to, and then are never spoken to. Speak every time you stand so you do not forget yourself. Do not forget yourself. Do not let one moment go by that doesn't remind you that your hearts beat thousands of times every single day, and that there are enough gallons of blood to make every one of you oceans. Do not settle for letting these waves settle, and for the dust to collect in your veins. This is for the poetry teachers, and for the people who go on vacations alone, for the sweat that drips off of Mick Jagger's singing lips, and for the shaking skirt on Tina Turner's shaking hips, for the heavens and for the hells through which Tina has lived. This is for the tired and for the dreamers. For those families that will never be like the Cleavers with perfectly made dinners, and sons like Wally and the Beaver. This is for the bigots, for the sexists, for the killers, for the big house jail sentence cats becoming redeemers, and for the springtime that always seems to know to show up after every one of our winters. This is for you. Make sure that by the time the fisherman returns, you are gone. Because just like the days, I burn at both ends, and every time I write, every time I open my eyes, I'm cutting out parts of myself just to give them to you. So shake the dust and take me with you when you do, for none of this has ever been for me. All that pushes and pulls, it pushes for you. So grab this world by its clothespins and shake it out again and jump on top and take it for a spin. And when you hop off, shake it again, for this is yours. Make my words worth something. Make this more than just another poem that I write, more than just another poem, like just another night that sits heavy above every one of us. Walk into it, breathe it in, let it crash through the halls of your arms like the millions of years of millions of poets coursing like blood, pumping and pushing, making you live, shaking the dust, so when the world knocks at your front door, you clutch the knob tightly, but then you open on up. And you run forward as far as you must, as fast as you can, into its widespread, welcoming arms, with your hands outstretched before you, fingertips trembling, though they may be. Thank you. Is that a question? What you got? I tend to buy all my clothes secondhand. So any vintage store, thrift store, or Buffalo Exchange is where I tend to get my clothings from. Well, thank you. So I tend to primarily either shop there or I will purchase things from American Apparel since they are sweatshop free, and I'm all for that. So that's where my socks are from. I think that's where my t-shirt is from. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Way in the back. Marvel more. Like DC's got Batman, which is awesome, but overall I read more Marvel books than DC, and DC's movies are just not good. Don't see Batman versus Superman. Like maybe you're thinking about it, but don't see it. Don't give money to Zack Snyder. Whatever you do, if there's one thing you do in life, don't give money to Zack Snyder. It is propaganda, good propaganda. Any other questions? Yes? My favorite part of the job, I end up getting to have really unique experiences, and I get to see parts of this country and parts of this world that I don't know if I would have gotten to see otherwise. You know, like it really allows me, I've been all over the States, I don't know how many times over the last 10 years, and seen a lot of really amazing parts of it. But really the best thing about it is, like, from doing this and being exposed to doing this, the people that I have built friendships with are some of the best and most important people to my life. So that's probably the biggest thing outside of, like, getting to write poetry. Have a great day.